Hi, Matt. So tell me about piston buttons, or buttons as you call them. What are they? Why would you use them?
Um, when you do something that requires a lot of service, meaning a nitrous engine, supercharged engine where to change the pistons,
Okay.
okay, you don't want to run. You don't want to run a ring. Well, here's the problem. Okay, here's a standard deal.
Okay.
See where the wrist pin goes in.
Yeah.
Okay, wrist pin's into the oil ring land. Okay, so now when you want to do this, you have to put the wrist pin in. Okay, then you got to put. I don't have it in front of me. You got to put the spiral locks in it to hold it in place. Then you got to put this spacer in place. Why? Because the problem is you have to have something to keep the oil ring supported. Okay, you can't just let it hang out like that. So you give you a spacer. They cut this gap a little wider. Okay, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, and it really depends on what ring package you run. Okay, space is going to go on, and it's going to go around to 360. But for this purpose, we're just ring space is going to go on, and the ring is going to lay on top of that. Okay, and what you're going to see is something like that. Okay, you're going to see the spacer with the ring and spiral locks, and there you go. Now to undo all that, top ring off, second ring off, oil ring off, spacer off, spiral locks out. If you've ever taken out spiral locks, you know how much work that can become. Okay, usually when you put spiros in it, even if you put the other style with the holes, I'll call them C clips for this point. Even if you put the regular clips with the pliers, that's or even the wire ones, they become a little tricky to put in. Now, we talked about the track. I changed pistons in 42 minutes. Here's how. Okay. Next piston. Everything's gapped and ready to go. Okay. I got no oil ring on it. I could have the other two rings on if I want, but I got no oil ring. Okay. Pull it apart. New one. Wrist pin goes in. Button. Button on the one side. Button on the other side. Done. Put the ring on it and assemble it. That fast. It's nothing. There's nothing slowing it down. There's no. There's no witness marks or marks where the spiral locks were in on holding the wrist pin and it would cause a problem. So now I'm done. Button goes in. Ready. Put the ring on it. Now I don't need spiral locks because the button takes up the difference in the wrist pin. Okay, they're both flush. Now the wrist pin is centered based on the button. The button can't come out because the wall's in the way. This is basically finishing the piston on this side. You fail a piston.
And so when you have the buttons in, do you still need to put the spacer at the bottom of the O rings, or no?
Disassemble that fast. Next piston, ready to go. And answer your question, no, I don't need this. Because now if you look, that's a 3/16 room ring. You can I don't know if you can see it real well, but the ring grooves are two completely different styles. I think this is 3/16, so it's 186. This one I think is 250. Okay,
Okay.
that affects me when I want to move the ring where I want to move the ring too. Okay, if I want to move the rings up or down or do something, when I have this style with the spirals in it and this, it limits what I could do because now I'm taking away the thickness of this. Okay, I think this is 50 thousandths. If it's not 50, it's 60. You have to have this to support the oil ring. This can jam up the oil ring if it gets too hot. In other words, it doesn't allow the oil ring to rotate. Rare, but it happens. That rarely happens. So the only time I ever have a problem with a button is when I've literally had too much fuel in it and I crush the ring stack. Okay, and what happens is everything gets pinched. Is a perfect example too. Look at the clearance difference on top. How far I've moved the rings down because I had the ability to. That's when we could come into compression height. But that's another conversation. So yeah, it's a much easier, much simpler, much faster way to do it. Both have their merits. If you put this in and it was in a street engine or a bracket engine, I'll call it a regular affordable racing engine, that works fine. Okay, me, I like the buttons. Anything that's going to make any power, it's going to have buttons. Service is much easier, and quite frankly, the wrist pin stays centered because these are so thick. Now I can change the wrist pin if I want to booger with weight. I can change the wrist pin and move it in a little bit. I can move it out a little bit. Really depends on what I want for weight, and then make up that difference with the length of the button. The length of the button. This button is not uniform to everything. It fits this combination. Okay, left and right are the same, but that piston is where it fits with a standard pin. Now you want to know why on big block I'll use a standard pin? That's simple on this combination because I can get pins anywhere. If I do a custom one, then it's a bigger problem. Like if I wanted to go to a 927 pin because I want it lighter, the problem putting a small block one in here, nobody's going to have the pin I want at the length or the size I might change it around to. So I find I use 990 pins. I vary the wall thickness. That answer your question?
That answers my question. So essentially, if you have an engine that you're going to have to take apart often, it just makes more sense to use buttons. And at what horsepower level does it make sense to start using buttons?
It's less horsepower, it's more serviceability. If you're gonna, the more horsepower you make, the more you got to service it. So that's really the key right here.
Got it.
Something like this with a spacer that goes on this one. That's a regular 24 degree big block head. Nothing special. Standard deal. Oh, I knocked the thing off here. Standard deal. You know. So you're gonna run this, and it's gonna live a long time. As far as a race engine, nitrous engine service. Nitrous engines are on buttons. Am I going to do it? If I were to do, sorry, I'll just hold it. If I was going to do nitrous on this, I'd probably still run the spacer, but I'm not going to run enough nitrous to burn it up. This is not a piston that's conducive to making a lot of power with nitrous.
Perfect. And pistons with buttons, do they cost more, or does the machine work?
This is a shelf piston.
Okay.
Okay. That's I think this was a JE. I'm sorry. This is a Vinoli.
Okay.
Shelf. You can call up, buy it, and done.
That's custom.
That's a custom piston. There's nothing about this that you're ever going to buy on a shelf anywhere. These pistons, when I buy them, especially on a nitrous engine, I buy them 10 at a time because you're gonna have a failure and you're gonna need a spare. As far as this one, and this was a job that I didn't do. Okay, this one here, you can see there's no attention to detail anywhere. It's off the shelf. This one here, everything's lightened. We thin the skirts. Okay, and then what I do is and this is for my purposes, I put the job number on it, the bore, the compression height, the weight, and how big the dome is. Why? Because if I ever have to change a piston in a hurry, I got to look around the shop. First thing I want to know is the job number. If I don't have the paper in front of me, that won't matter. But then after that, this is going to tell me the bore. It's going to tell me the compression height, how much it weighs, and how dome is. So if I'm thrashing to get something together, do I have something close? First example, I've been at the track. This has a 40,000 dome. I raised the compression a little bit. I've taken a flat top piston, 4600, same piston, no flat top, same relief here. Everything's the same. It could be a little bit heavier, and I put it in, didn't think twice about it. Is it perfect? No. Is it going to work? Absolutely. As long as it has buttons, it's the same bore, it's relatively close in weight, and more importantly, it's got the right bore and the right compression height for the piston. And that at the track is a big deal. Everybody uses their own term. I call it meat balling. It's not perfect, but you want to make the next run. You may be 5, 6, 10 hours from home. Well, if you're that far away from home, better be able to get a spare piston, because you ain't walking in the back of your shop to get a piston that's not there. I'll carry at least 20. There's been times where I've used on one weekend I might have used 2 and 3, another weekend used 2 or 3, another weekend 2 or 3. So I get to the end of the pile and it's like I didn't bring enough pistons. I burned up 3 or 4 more, and I didn't have enough in the trailer. I made an oversight. That's why this is all important. It's all important for me to put it together as a track. Okay? It really is that simple. This piston has a lot of thought in it. It's a better alloy. Horizontal gas ports. It's just a real good piece.
And that's another video. We could talk about gas ports. We could talk about skirt coatings. We could talk about dome coatings. You know,
Gas
for the
ports,
crown of the piston.
skirt design, whether it's cam cut or not, the stroke, like here. I'll give you a real brief. See this right here? That's the stroke. You cut this out, that's called a cam cut. Not because of the camshaft, this is going to clear the bottom of the bore. Because it's got so much stroke that it will literally hit the bottom of the webbing in the block. We take all this material out. This doesn't have any of that. This piston at 4,600 is substantially lighter than this one at 4,600. This is a clunker. Somebody went in and lightened the skirt a little bit here, but a little bit. Then we can have a conversation about the deck of the piston. What is that? The thickness right here between the top and the inside. That's going to determine how much pressure it'll take. Okay, another conversation. I can go hours and hours.
And we could also talk about, if you're going to lighten a piston, where you should remove material, where you shouldn't remove material. Same with connecting rods.
This is just from my experience. Buy the piston you need, spec it, get it as light as you can get it, and put it in. Don't spend no more time. Like, for example, when I buy 10, they're all on the money. They're not 5 grams off from each other. They're all the same. If I get funny and really push it, maybe I'll see a half a gram, but that could be from dirt, that could be from oil, that could be anything. These are all the same. Shell pistons vary. Shell pistons you can take way off. Okay?
That makes sense.
But this is more, and this is a real good piston too. It's not junk. It's a real good piston. This is not a TRW piston. This is something designed to take some power. But there's less time and thought in this because it's made for the shelf. Maybe they'll bang just this number. Maybe they'll bang 1,000 of these out while it's time in the machine comes. This they're going to build a custom for me. You're going to pay a lot of money for this. This piston is probably $100 a piece. Usually it's $1.50 a piece. I paid as much as $200 a piece. This one here is probably closer to 200 because I went for the buttons, the way I did the gas ports, how far I moved the ring down, how thick I left. Like part of the reason here, I was going to get off the point, but like this little pump up here, that was never a matter of raising the compression. This is I wanted the dome thicker so I could put more nitrous to it. So between here and the bottom of it, I could put more and take more load. I have taken pistons and literally pushed right through here with the nitrous. The load was too high on the top. You can do it anything, turbocharged, supercharged, but you get into the point where you're overloading the top of the piston or the deck of the piston. So that becomes very important. And we can talk about alloys and all sorts of stuff.
Another conversation, but absolutely great information. So thank you for explaining buttons and why you'd want to use them, especially in your race engine that you're going to be servicing often.
You know, honestly, if you came to me for a race engine and I'm just giggling to myself, I try to sell you buttons every time, whether you're taking it apart or not. Period. Because what happens in particular with the button, it's not mandatory. You're strengthening the piston by putting this button in. Okay, rather than having a little piece of steel to go across this bridge, I'm adding all this material here in the side of the piston, which is going to give it a little more strength.
Which is going to strengthen that ringland area because now.
Right. What would you rather have? Would you rather have the button? I fell in. And all that area covered, or would you rather have this and
Have
all
it,
wide open? It's really
the button
simple,
makes sense.
you know.
Yep.
But again, you know, what's mandatory and what you can afford. That's all. Power's going out. We got a storm going on.
Awesome. Well, thanks again.
You're
Great
welcome.
information.
Not a problem.